A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, it is a time of chaos in the galaxy. The Empire's stormtroopers oppress the people while criminal clans steal their money. Then there's the Rebel Alliance, a group of freedom fighters trying to upset the balance and liberate the galaxy. Throughout all of this is a lingering legend, a myth among the people, of a mystical energy known only as the Force. Hey, I'm Big Mike, and this is the tutorial for West End Games' Star Wars RPG. Okay, before I even begin explaining the rules of the system, I have to explain the edition of the system I'm playing. West End Games' Star Wars RPG is arguably one of the most successful and beloved IP-based RPGs in the history of the hobby. Back in the early days of the fandom, this was the system that helped novelists of the original expanded universe work out details from old splat books and source books made from this system, if Wikipedia is to be believed. The system was in publication from 1987 to 1998, from its first edition in 87 to the second edition in 92 to the revised and expanded edition of the second edition in 1996. The rules I'm working with are the revised, expanded, and updated ones made by fans in 2014. That's how beloved this system is! It has survived and been shared despite multiple new Star Wars systems being produced by other companies, including Fantasy Flight Games and Wizards of the Coast. And yet, it's the one that still gets updated to this day. It's the one that gets expanded rules for the freaking Mandalorian and Star Wars Rebels shows made by fans. And because we played it, you get a tutorial. Here we go. West End Games' Star Wars RPG, or Star Wars D6, as I'll be calling it from here on, uses pools of 6-sided dice to determine the outcome of actions. Players roll a total number of D6s depending on the total combined score of their attributes and skills. The player adds the value of all dice rolled, and the total must exceed the target number of the challenge that they are trying to overcome. That's it. That's the system. Yep, sometimes it's the simplicity that keeps you going. Okay, so there's a bit more than that. Players have 6 attributes: strength, dexterity, knowledge, perception, mechanical, and technical. Your character has so many d6s under these attributes, and those add to any associated skills. So a player could have 2 dice in dexterity for all dexterity-based skill checks, but have an additional 3 dice for using blasters specifically. That would bring the total to 5d6s rolled for blaster use. You can increase an attribute to increase all skills by the same amount, or a skill on its own. The only variation to this process are advanced skills. Advanced skills are separate, hard-to-learn skills that are usually kept separate because they can be game-breaking. These are things like crafting new weapons, new ships, and heavy medicine skills. And each skill can have further sub-skills called specializations for more dice. Things like flying specific spacecraft or hacking, known as slicing, as opposed to general computer programming knowledge. Whenever the player rolls a pool of d6s, the DM sets the difficulty based on how hard the task should be. This range of task difficulties is actually applied to combat as well, so we'll be coming back to it later. There's also advantages and disadvantages that can be picked up at the cost or by bestowing additional dice. As the player rolls, they designate 1 dice in the pool as the wild dice. If the player rolls a 2 to a 5, the sum is totaled as normal. If the player rolls a 6, they add the total and roll again, adding the new roll to the total. If they get a 1 on the wild dice, it's the Game Master's choice. It can just be added as normal, a complication can be introduced, or the wild dice result of 1 is subtracted, as well as the highest dice the player got in that dice roll. Shit gets crazy. The game also has 2 kinds of currency to help players augment their dice rolls. First is character points. Character points allow players to add a single die to a roll. You can only use 1 per turn, and if that extra dice rolls a 6, you get to reroll and add the new value, and this keeps going the more 6s you roll. In addition, character points can be spent to permanently improve the character, or additional points can be spent for more effects. There's a whole table breaking it down inside the rules, and we're not going to go into it in more detail here. And now, Force points. The Force is a mystical energy. It surrounds us, binds us, and connects us to the universe. All beings are connected to the Force. Now, this system makes a distinction between being a Force user and the special currency all characters have, which is called Force points. All characters have 1 Force point that they can use in-game to double the dice from all stats, skills, and advantages for their dice pool in a round. You get this point back through role-playing. If you act heroic, you get good Force points, but if you act villainous and evil, well, that's a way some would call unnatural. it's the dark side. There are more rules involving force powers, but let's be honest, half the fun of Star Wars is the Force, so if I'm going to get you to read these rules on your own, I'd have to leave those rules out. And now combat. First, there's initiative. Initiative decides which side in the battle goes first. That's right, which side, not which player. Everyone on their respective side takes an action before it flips to the opposite side. The character with the highest perception rolls for initiative using that dice pool for their group. Ties are broken by whoever has the highest perception stat. Now for all combat, players must roll the associated dice pool for the weapon skill. Some weapons and equipment can modify and increase your skills to hit. For ranged combat, there is a difficulty determined based on how far you are from your opponent. Each ranged weapon has range bands for point blank, short, medium, and long range. Those match up with the difficulty ranges I mentioned earlier. A player needs only to hit the target difficulty based on the range to hit the opponent. Melee weapons, meanwhile, have a difficulty assigned to them based again on their difficulty range. This is a static range that the player has to roll against. Now, if you are being targeted by someone, you do have some defensive options. You can roll to dodge or parry as a reaction to being hit, depending on the circumstance, and that replaces the normal difficulty number to hit you. However, if you choose to only dodge or parry for that round, you add that roll to the difficulty to hit you, but you're not doing anything else for that round. There's more rules about combat modifiers and grenades, but this tutorial is long enough. When players are hit, the attacker rolls damage, either the ranged weapons damage or the melee weapons damage plus their strength value, against the total of the defender's armor and strength roll. And armor has different values if the attack is physical, like bullets or knives, or energy-based, like a blaster shot or a lightsaber. And now, damage and wounds. If the attack gets through the armor, not only does the armor degrade, but the player takes status effects like stunned and wounded that stack and increase the more they get hurt. And that is the Star Wars D6 system. Despite a bit of older crunch, it's relatively streamlined and easy to use, and I encourage you to check it out for yourself. For the rest of you, you'll have to watch us play it on D20 Live.